Puis appelez l'affaire, je vous prie. Le greffier. Bonjour, Madame, Messieurs les juges. Il s'agit de l'affaire IT 96-23/2. Est-ce le procureur contre Dragan Zelenović? Le président, je vous remercie, Monsieur le greffier.
Yes, I received French on channel 4. I now receive either live or English on channel 3. And I now receive again English on channel 4.
I'm hearing nothing.
You can't hear anything?
No. It was first French, now I'm hearing nothing.
This trial chamber is sitting today to deliver its sentencing judgment in the case of the prosecution versus Dragan Zelenović. For the purposes of this hearing, the trial chamber will summarize briefly its findings, and we emphasize that this is a summary only, and that the authoritative account of the trial chamber's finding is to be found in a written sentencing judgment, which will be made available at the end of this session. Mr. Zelenović was charged with 7 counts of torture and rape as crimes against humanity, and 7 counts of torture and rape as violations of the laws or customs of war. He's charged as individually responsible pursuant to Article 7.1 of the statute. The crimes charged took place in Foča municipality in Bosnia and Herzegovina from July to October 1992. Some years after an indictment against Mr. Zelenović had been issued by this tribunal, Mr. Zelenović left his home and traveled to Russia under a false name in order to avoid detection and arrest. He was arrested by Russian authorities on the 22nd of August 2005, and on the 8th of June 2006 he was transferred to Bosnia and Herzegovina. From there he was transferred to the tribunal and detained at the United Nations detention unit. The referral bench was at this time already seized of a prosecution motion pursuant to Rule 11 bis to transfer the case of Mr. Zelenović to Bosnia and Herzegovina for trial there. However, on the 14th of December 2006, the prosecution and the defense in this case filed a joint motion for consideration of a plea agreement between Mr. Zelenović and the Office of the Prosecutor, according to which Mr. Zelenović agreed to plead guilty to 3 counts of torture and 4 counts of rape as crimes against humanity. During a hearing before this trial chamber on the 17th of January 2007, Mr. Zelenović pleaded guilty to the mentioned 7 counts of crimes against humanity. At that same hearing, the trial chamber accepted the guilty pleas and found Mr. Zelenović guilty accordingly. The facts underlying the guilty plea are set out in a factual statement attached to the plea agreement. The trial chamber will now summarize these facts. Dragan Zelenović was born on the 12th of February 1961 in Foča, eastern Bosnia and Herzegovina. During the indictment period, Mr. Zelenović was a soldier and, de facto, a military policeman in the Bosnian Serb territorial defense, and from the summer of 1992 onwards in the Bosnian Serb army. The political and military takeover of Foča municipality started with Serb forces shelling the town of Foča with heavy artillery in the beginning of April 1992. This attack was part of an armed conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina between forces of the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serb forces. The attacks on Foča and the surrounding villages, most of which were undefended and had no military targets, lasted until mid-July 1992. During and after the takeover of Foča town and its surrounding villages and municipalities, Muslim and other non-Serb inhabitants were subjected to a widespread and systematic pattern of abuses designed to remove the majority of them from the municipality. Muslim and other non-Serb inhabitants were methodically rounded up, beaten and sometimes killed. Men and women were separated and transported to various detention facilities where they were subjected to humiliating and degrading treatment. After extended periods of detention, the detainees were deported or forcibly transferred to Montenegro or locations controlled by the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina. As a consequence of the attack on the civilian population of Foča and its surrounding municipalities, Muslim civilians were to a very large extent expelled from the region. Mr. Zelenović was involved in the attack on Foča town and its surrounding villages, and the subsequent arrest of civilians between mid-April and mid-July 1992. The parties agree that an armed conflict existed in Bosnia and Herzegovina at all times relevant to the indictment. Furthermore, the parties agree that Mr. Zelenović's criminal acts and omissions were part of a widespread or systematic attack against the civilian population, especially the Muslim population of Foča municipality. Finally, the parties agree that Mr. Zelenović was aware of the existence of the armed conflict and of the widespread and systematic attack on the non-Serb, primarily Muslim, civilian population, and of the fact that his conduct occurred within and contributed to that attack. The crimes to which Mr. Zelenović has pleaded guilty took place in several different detention centers in Foča municipality, where Muslim women and girls were held. On the 3rd of July 1992, Mr. Zelenović, along with other men, arrested a group of about 60 Muslim women, children and elderly men from a village in Foča municipality and took them to a temporary detention facility called Bukbijela. At the detention center, Mr. Zelenović and other men separated the women from the children. They started to interrogate the women, and in the course of these interrogations, the women were threatened with sexual assault and murder. During one of the first days of detention, Mr. Zelenović and another man interrogated witness 75 about her village and whether the villagers had weapons. Witness 75 was warned by the other man that she would be raped by soldiers and killed afterwards if she did not answer truthfully. When Mr. Zelenović and the other interrogator found that the victim did not answer their questions adequately, she was taken by a soldier to another room where 10 soldiers raped her in turn. Mr. Zelenović knew that his action in respect of the interrogation and his failure to act with regard to the threats of rape and death against witness 75 substantially assisted in the commission of this crime against her. Around the same time, in July 1992, Mr. Zelenović and 3 unidentified soldiers interrogated witness 87, a 15-year-old Muslim girl, in a room at Bukbijela. During the interrogation, Mr. Zelenović and the 3 soldiers accused the girl of not telling the truth and raped her. During the rape, one of the soldiers threatened the victim, by putting a gun to her head. Within 10 days of being detained at Bukbila, the group of women, children and elderly were transferred and detained together with other persons in 2 classrooms at Foča High School. On one occasion, Mr. Zelenović, together with other men, selected 4 women and girls from the classrooms, among them witness 75 and witness 87. Mr. Zelenović led them to another classroom where soldiers were waiting. He then decided which woman should go with which soldier. Mr. Zelenović raped witness 75, while the other soldiers raped the other women and girls.